I'm supposed to call you. I will probably get into that habit maybe throughout this conversation. But for everybody watching, this is Aradhana Lal. She is the Vice President of Brand and Corporate Communication and Sustainability Initiatives at Lemon Tree. She was also one of the co-founders, and she's also going to talk about everything that they've been up to in terms of the diversity and inclusion practices at Lemon Tree as well. But thank you so much, ma'am, for doing this. I think it's great that we have people like you to share your stories with us. And people like me, I'm still, I've graduated only about 4-5 years ago. But other people who are still on campus, people who are looking to make their careers in the corporate world, it's an inspiration to hear of stories like yours. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you.
Great. So, ma'am, the first question I want to ask is, starting with basics. You've been in the hospitality industry now, I think, close to 30 years. What's really motivated you to do what you're doing?
So firstly, I want to tell you that if you call me ma'am again, I'm going to start charging $100 each time. So you have to stick to Ad or Aradhana. Yeah. So coming to hospitality, when I started at Taj, it was about getting into the hospitality business, which is a total people's business. So I had finished college, I hadn't done an MBA yet, and I thought that how wonderful can Taj be? And someone put me together with them. And I think those 6 years were, one of the greatest learnings I had ever. Of course, within 3 years, because I was part of sales, within 3 years, I got restless and I was like, I need to do an MBA, I need to find the next level and so on. So it took me a year to figure things in my head, a year or two. And then also sometimes when you're working, it's very hard to say, let me stop and take a sabbatical. So I was a bit lost in that process. Finally, by the 4th year of working, I was very clear. And then I moved forward to prepare. I had to figure out how to take leave, how to study, all of that. And that's when I went in for the MBA and I took the break after Taj. The situation with Lemon Tree was different. I was already working at that time at Levers in Bombay. Yeah. And the person who had worked with me, or rather I had worked with at Taj, a gentleman called Pathu Keswani, he was looking at setting up his own company, namely Lemon Tree Hotels. And he was entering a very different space. So this was the mid-market space. It was 17 years ago. And at that time, there was no mid-market. So when he sent me the concept note, it was a 3-page Word document, the concept note on the brand Lemon Tree Hotels. And he had told me he would like me to take care of sales and marketing. And that's my area of work.
Right.
That note sort of did it for me. It was so well written, with so much passion, so much clarity. And I could see that hotel in my eyes. And, I was like, dude, if I can see it, that means this is possible. But still, it was a difficult decision to say, I will leave Hindustan Unilever and I will join a company that doesn't even have 4 walls. It was really difficult. So it took a month, but I figured it out and I did the move. So I'm part of the founding team at Lemon Tree and I'm here. So while it is the hospitality business, I think the way I looked at it was more the creation of a brand and the creation of a business. That's how I saw it at that time.
Right. And what has changed? It's been 17 years at Lemon Tree. I'm sure you said you started out with sales and now you shifted on to sustainability and diversity and inclusion. How has that switch been? Or do you kind of see that as part of the founding team kind of doing what they do?
No, it's unusual to move out of sales and marketing into this space. And also, I have never been educated or trained in the sustainability space. So it is a bit unusual to do this. I think the reason was simple. The kind of work we are doing for sustainability, whether it's the whole environment-friendly practices piece or it's the social aspect, which is the diversity and inclusion piece, it's been going on more or less from the time we started. So the environment piece is for 17 years, the diversity piece is for about 13 years. So it was already part of the company's way of thinking, way of doing business and, the DNA. Yeah. So when we looked at it a few years ago, I'm handling the sustainability piece now. It's been about 12 years roughly. So, no, not 12, sorry, I'm making a mistake there, about 8 years. So at that point, I think Pathu was looking at the business and trying to understand where is it that we need to put more energy and focus. And the feeling was that the ESG piece needs that focus. And that's how it became my portfolio. I had already stopped handling sales. There was another colleague handling sales by that time. It moved in stages. I was still handling the marketing piece. So then that stopped because we wanted the focus on sustainability. And then there was another team leading marketing. So that's how it worked. So it's not natural to make this move.
Awesome. Uh, so talking about your journey till where you are right now, what have been some of the major inflection points for you? Things that put you on this path, so to speak.
So if I look at my journey, I don't know, from the beginning, I'm not talking about the time I was born, but some kind of beginning. There are a few major inflection points in my mind. Let me try and recap them, and I'll try to make this as crisp as I can and be mindful of the time. For me, the first one was at the age of 9, going to a boarding school and coming away from my parents. It was the first time I was doing that. My father was in the foreign service. He was in another country. My boarding school was in India, and it was not even in Delhi where my grandparents were. It was in Dehradun. I'm from Welham Girls School. So it was an exciting adventure when I left home. But when I reached the school, I realized that I was totally alone and I didn't know anyone there, and my folks weren't there, and I was a 9-year-old kid. So I recall weeping. I actually wept for days and days and days because, you take a young kid away from her mother, this is what will happen. Yeah. But I was meeting people, making friends. It took about possibly 3 months of getting used to that environment, and the most important thing, of making friends. Yeah. The whole mental space changed, and I found that amazing. The ability to adjust to a new life and a new world. So this has been a key theme for me throughout my life now. I've moved cities, I've moved companies, I've moved roles, and I've also had friends or families who have been my friends. And the way I sort of blend into their family, it's almost like it's my own home. And this is interesting. So, I mean, there are not many families like that. I would say there are 2 or 3 families like that. And I think it's all goes to what happened to me when I was 9 years old. So this whole ability to be a part of your world and create your happiness in that world. So that was one inflection point. Another inflection point, I think, was when school finished, and it was an all-girls school. So coming into Delhi and being in a college, I tried desperately to be at SRCC, Shri Ram College of Commerce. I got through, all of that happened, but there was no girls' hostel there, separate hostel. So I joined Lady Shri Ram, LSR. So I was a bit rebellious at that stage, and I was done with being a good girl in school and all of that. So that stage was very interesting. Of course, there were friends, there were classes, but the classes were incidental. It was about getting to know the city. It was about culture. The amount of music shows, dance shows, theater programs I saw in those 3 years. I barely passed. I don't even know what my grades were in college. But I went to class. I didn't miss class, but I just didn't bother to put the effort. And I think the sheer beauty of what art and culture and history can be about, and Delhi is a great place. So that was a very interesting learning for me. And I met enough boys. It didn't matter that I was in a girls' hostel. I met enough boys. It was fine. So that was a fun time. Then, of course, the next inflection point, which is not a happy one, but it made a difference to my life, was my mother passed away when I was 21 years old. She was only 44. So for me, that moment, it was just after college, and I was... but when that happened, my whole orientation, my whole brain just changed. So I had to give up the plan. And then a few months later, I looked for a job, and that's when the Taj happened. Now, I would probably call that an inflection point too, for 2 reasons. It was my first job. And secondly, it was in the hospitality business, and that too a sales job. So it was not about only how you looked and appeared and giving a smile to the guest. You had to negotiate. So what I learned at that time, that ability to keep customer service going, and yet you're negotiating because you're talking about price, you're talking about getting business, and the hardcore sales job, what's called business basically. So I found that whole process and that whole learning very exciting, very interesting. And it really, like, I was made for it. I had no idea I was going to do it. I just did it. Of course, then I spoke about the restlessness and the desire to do an MBA. And then IIMA happened. Most certainly, after 6 years, when you take a sabbatical and you go to a bloody MBA and you're with people who are 6 years younger and they've come straight out of IIT, and you're scared as hell that, am I going to really make it in this damn 2-year, whatever, 18-month program? So my entire focus at IIMA initially, the first semester, was to just not fail, okay? So everyone used to make fun of me, and they used to say, you want to know anything about any case, ask Al, she knows everything because she reads everything. So it was very funny. Anyway, so I did not fail, I passed, and may I tell you, for my score or whatever for the first year, I was number 100 in a batch of 200. Now, what I want to tell you is that meant that there were like 100 people whose score was lower than mine. I have never been more delighted than that. No, it was really super. That was an interesting point. And the next one would be this thing of being able to get into my dream company, which is what I was referring to, that short piece in Hindustan Unilever. I had dreamt of it in school, in college, and certainly at IIMA. And it was just insane that I actually got that job. Like, it was like, wow. It was a different business. It was called direct selling, and very unknown and unusual for levers. We built it. So again, it was the creation of a brand, creation of a business, very interesting, but within a very well-established organization. And most of all, it was Bombay. And I had the time of my life. So when you're single and you're 30 and you've just finished your MBA and you go to Bombay, it is fabulous. Okay. So I really, really enjoyed the city again. And even today, I would be open to going to Bombay anytime, any day to live there. You know, I just love it. Then the next leg was Lemon Tree, which was again a very, very big turning point, because I was going to give up something known, established, and come in a slightly entrepreneurial way, though I wasn't investing, but to make myself available for this new business and the creation of this company. I thought it was definitely a big decision. And where I am today, so the entrepreneurial idea was we all got ESOPs, employee stock options, which means when the company would go public, we would be some sort of millionaires, I suppose. Right now, I don't want to talk about that because the stock price is at a different level, but that's okay. Anyway, what it meant was there was a wealth creation opportunity. So that was very interesting for me, that in the middle of my career, I was getting something to look at, which would be creation, of course, and a wealth creation opportunity. So I thought that was very interesting. The last inflection point I want to refer to is very, very recent. It is just over 30 days old. It is when I got COVID. So we are living in this big bad world of the pandemic. We've all been ultra careful. We've all been process driven, you know, masks, sanitizer, gloves, whatever, PPE kits when required. But at some point I was outside somewhere. I don't know who I met. I don't know what happened because none of my friends had it. So it wasn't to a known person. But I got COVID. Now, what it did, why was it a turning point for me? It did two things. One is it told you that you have to be capable of handling yourself when you are at a low point and handle yourself alone. So I'm anyway on my own. I live on my own. But to be absolutely alone when you need to go to a hospital, it is absolutely surreal, okay? Because otherwise your sister, your friend, I have been to hospital before, I've had some minor surgery or whatever. So it's very normal for someone to be next to you. You're supposed to just relinquish everything to that person, and that person is in charge. And you know, normally I'm always in charge. So I'm so happy at that moment when you're unwell to hand over the charge to the other person. So here, I had to be in charge physically because I was first home quarantine. Mentally, you know, one of the things that people have learned in COVID is the impact it has on your mental health, right? And I was like, dude, if I'm alone, I am not going to be sad. I just can't do it. So I had to just find it within me to say, you have to turn on that bulb, you have to do something, but just turn it on, you know? Then the hospital stint happened, few days, whatever. Then again home, it was all right. There was no crisis, but I was definitely unwell and I needed treatment. So the learning for me was the ability to handle yourself, the ability to work with your own mind and say, dude, I can keep this positive. Not the bloody test, but the mind, you know. So that worked rather nicely for me. I want to add one flavor to this. I had signed up for a program called Heal Your Life, which is run by a trained instructor here, a lady called Suparna. There's a person known as Louisa Hay. She's no more. She came up with this whole philosophy of Heal Your Life. So there was a 5-week program and we were to do an online class every Friday and then our own private work. The first class occurred on the Friday when I was in the hospital. So I decided to get onto it. It was on Zoom. I decided to get onto it. I just said I'll keep my video off because it's too dramatic to join a group who you don't know, where you don't know anyone except a teacher, and you're sitting in a hospital and what your face looks, you know, whatever. So they agreed to say, I keep the video off. Now, what was really empowering for me at that time was that we often believe that things come our way and, you know, when you're stressed, then more load comes on your head. And I could have looked at it that way, saying, oh God, this class had to be at this time. Now I'm sick and now what is all this? I looked at it differently. For me, it was, I want to be positive. I want to stay positive in my head. I'm alone, so there's anyway no one next to me. So why not join the class? Because the whole approach in Heal Your Life is about positivity, affirmations, and thinking of good things in your life. I cannot tell you, if there was a way of saying that somebody was the best student in that 5-week program, I think Suparna might say I was the best student. My energy was so high, mental energy, right? Physical energy was low, but mental energy was high. So that was a very interesting point for me as to come. That's the way I see what happened to me with COVID.
Yeah. No, I'm picking up 3 or 4 themes from everything you said. Things that I'm taking away as lessons. Number one on that is, this idea of taking risk, right? Which is what you've done all throughout, right? Taking a risk with Taj, then taking a risk with leaving that and doing an MBA, then taking a risk with leaving Unilever and then taking on Lemon Tree. Even at Lemon Tree, changing roles, which is atypical of a person on your path. So risk, then something else that you said around, having this mindset of looking at things in a way that help you as opposed to bring you down, right? Everything that you spoke about with COVID, everything you spoke about in terms of even being at boarding school, right? And those childhood memories, I think, actually end up forming the foundation for a lot of other things ahead in your life. So, I mean, those 2 things specifically also, it's kind of like if you were to take out, ingredients or flavors of your life, it's like those 2 things would definitely be big ones there, right? The ability to take risk and the ability to do it in the right spirit as well. That how do you take it, in cricketing terms, on the front foot and kind of drive it out of the stadium. So, I mean, that's definitely something that I think would have also helped you take that step into an entrepreneurial journey as well, right? Where you know that you are able to take on stuff like this, because it's not an easy journey to decide that I'm going to work for ESOP and not for whatever the salary was when you kind of did MBA and after that. Yeah. So, I mean, that's definitely something that inspires me. And ma'am, ma'am Al, talking about
Watch your wallet. Watch your wallet.
talking about your journey at IIMA, how was that experience? You studied at DU, so I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of gyan from this as well, because I had a very similar kind of shift. But how was it? How was that?
So the first thing I want to say about IIMA is it's fabulous. And if anyone can get a chance to study there, they must. That's the first thing. The second thing, I was scared shitless. Okay. I was actually scared shitless in the first year. And I knew by the time the second year will come, I'll be a total battameez. I knew that. But anyway, so in the first year, my constant prayer to myself and to the universe was, I will pass. I must pass. I just couldn't look at going through that journey again. So I got jaundice while I was there in the 2nd or 3rd semester, I don't remember. So I had to come to Delhi for 2 weeks. When I went back, my buddy Arvind, I got after his case to teach me production. And, for me, those numbers were tough. I told him, I said, you fool, if I don't pass this, you will be the biggest failure. I put so much pressure on him. So he had to teach me in the middle of the night. We did everything in IIMA in the middle of the night. So he had to keep teaching me. He had to remain calm. I was getting hysterical. He had to just make sure I passed that one particular subject. The rest of the subjects I handled. I think he was teaching me production and stats, if I'm not wrong. And he was always, of course, IIT Chennai and all of that stuff. So I passed. I need to tell you this very important part that I didn't say a single subject, okay? So my whole focus was, so here's another interesting thing. I was in an environment where everybody was 6 years younger. I was in an environment where I was amongst 30 people in a batch of 20 who had come with more than 2 years work ex. So the IIMA decided to do an experiment with our batch. They took people who had 5 years, 6 years. There was one guy, Abhijit, who had worked with the Indian Railways. He had 10 years experience. So they did this deliberately in that, okay? So I was aware of this, and I told myself 2 things when I went in. The one, we know that I must pass. And the second was that even though I'm 6 years older and even though I've worked, I am not going to use that as a stupid trump card all the time. So I am equal to my batchmates and my batchmates are equal to me. So I'm very happy to report, you can ask any batchmate, I never said that when you go into the working world, you will see. I know I'm telling you. I never said those lines ever, ever, ever. And even when we did group work, I never said, ki, I'm whatever, older, senior, whatever shit, you do it. In fact, I would do more. And then all these fools would say, we want her in our group, she'll make the presentation, she'll do everything. So I'm like, you people are now piling stuff on. So it was really important to again blend in and to live in the way that you need to live in IIMA. And so it was really fun. So there was this whole strict education, study, results, marks kind of thing. And there was this whole mad, crazy, bloody party which wouldn't end. It was fabulous, absolutely fabulous. Like if I could live those 2 years again with that same fear, I would just live them again.
That sounds pretty much like what it is even now. But I always feel like people had more fun than we did. Whenever you hear about alumni stories, it's always
Possibly.
like the batch before you and the batch before them always had it better.
Maybe we were just crazy. I don't know what it was.
But great. So specifically after IIMA, when you joined Levers as well, right? What was that experience like? Joining Levers, because you said it was something that you wanted for a large part of your life, and then making that switch. How was that? How were those couple of years for you?
So while we are talking of IIMA, I'm happy to say that I belong to many, many universities. So I belong to the University of Delhi, of course, because I studied at LSR. I belong to the University of Taj. I belong to the University of Hindustan Lever. And most certainly for the last 17 years, I belong to the University of Lemon Tree. So what I mean to say is the organizations I worked with, there were two things that were happening. One was either that organization was already so well established and so large and so, world leader, basically. They were world leaders, right? Whether you look at Taj, you look at Levers. So the sheer excitement of being able to go into something that's so well established and be able to learn was of a different level, right? In fact, for me to enter Levers, when they did the interview, they told me that the 6 years of Taj, because it was a hotel industry, would be equated to 4 years of equivalent work in FMCG. So I had to lose 2 years, like mathematically. It was fine. I said, that's fine because I want to be here. It's all right. So the sheer scale of that organization, the sheer processes, the kind of knowledge that sat there, the people you met, my God, there are some iconic people in Levers, and I had a chance to meet so many of them. I don't want to take names right now, but they were just fabulous people. They were leading the company, whether it was the chairman or the heads of businesses. And my team members, there were some who were very much from an FMCG background, my colleagues, my peers, my senior. And there were some who were from a totally different background, nothing to do with FMCG. So I think we made an awesome combination. And again, it was a learning journey creation. So within a framework, within a structure of Levers, we created this unstructured business, which was called Avions at that time, later called Hindustan Lever Network, what is called direct selling. Oh man, we were learning about a new industry. I was learning to be in this new company. I was in a new city. I was on a bloody high and I didn't even need alcohol. Like it was awesome. It was, so I think those 4 years were really good. There was some politics and all, but there's politics everywhere. It's all right. The reason I actually left was that this new opportunity at that time, which was Lemon Tree Hotels, was too, it was once in a lifetime. I could have not said no. I don't know how I would have said no, actually. This idea that one would set up a business, one would create a brand in a segment that didn't exist. That's another thing you have to remember, Garima. This segment of mid-scale hotels or mid-market hotels, 17 years ago was totally undefined, like a white space. And Patu's idea is what sort of brought this space into relevance in India. Today, there are many, many brands in the segment. But at that time, there was just us. That was exciting. And of course, sales and marketing, which was my forte. So I was very happy. I didn't know anything about sustainability and I didn't know it was coming. I didn't know anything. So I think that reason alone made me move over, but it was very tough to move out of Levers. I know. But I think it's been great.
So also talking about, because we're doing this as part of the women special interest group in the alumni network, we also like to ask this question around putting a gender lens on your experience. Have you felt that there has been, say, a difference, or either in terms of perspective or experience, because you were a woman in any part of your career or school life?
So my school and college were both all-girl organizations. So, one of the fierce ideas in an all-girl school or an all-girl college is that you are the best, basically. So it's a fierce belief, and that men and women don't matter at that time. So it didn't affect at all. If I look at the workplace, I think the kind of businesses I have been in, both men and women bring strengths to those businesses. So a hotel business, a sales business, it's great if there's a lady who does it or a guy. I mean, they'll both bring different kinds of strengths. So I never felt that my being a woman mattered when I was either in the Taj or in Levers or in Lemon Tree. It never acted as any kind of a impediment. Did it act as an advantage? I would say in some situations. I wouldn't say throughout and overall it's an advantage, but there are some situations. So for instance, our whole EQ, the way we can connect with team members and the way we can lead a team, it's different. The emotional connection is different. If you have been a salesperson and you've learned how to negotiate, then to be able to do that and throw in certain touches when required, you can do that easier as a woman than as a guy, possibly, I think. But, for me, I myself am gender neutral in my head. I don't mean in terms of sexual orientation. I mean in terms of just the way I think about the ability of what men can do and women can do. So, for instance, my sister has a son. So whether she had a son or whether she had a daughter, to me, it would be absolutely the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So I've never found it to be an impediment. I don't believe that men are better than women or women are better than men. I think we both bring great stuff to the table and we can both be one hot mess when we want to be, right? So it's fine. It doesn't matter. The only place where I think there's something slightly different about women specifically is this idea of emotional connections and emotional quotient, basically. That might be. But there are enough men who know how to do that as well, so it's fine. So I don't think it's relevant. I don't think it's relevant.
Great. And just connecting that to everything you're doing with diversity and inclusion. And I saw a couple of your the TED Talk that you've done and a bunch of other stuff that you've done with Lemon Tree's presentations as well. And it's very interesting because you talk about the concept of inclusion more than diversity, right? Everywhere else you'll hear brands talking about, we want to increase the diversity. It's almost like a quota, right? That there's a percentage and then our job is done. Whereas actually the more difficult piece is the inclusion part of it. How do you make sure that they stay with you, and how do you make sure that everybody else adapts to that, right? And you said one line in that around how it's inclusion and not charity, right? Inclusivity and not charity. How does that, I mean, what do you kind of think about that program, and what have you learned along that way? Because I think there are a lot of parallels that can be drawn for when people talk about gender diversity as well, right? So how does that kind of pan out for you?
So what I want to say is this opportunity that came my way 8-9 years ago of leading the sustainability piece without being an engineer. I'm not an engineer. I've done BCom honors. It was something unusual, and today I'm very grateful that it came my way. At that time, I was a bit lost, like what's going on. I started learning again, of course. But the reason is, in today's world, the whole sustainability piece is very relevant. Whether you look at it from an environment lens or a governance lens or from a social lens, which is diversity and inclusion. And I think it's the way of businesses for tomorrow. So therefore, I feel I was able to enter a very relevant space. That's the first thing. The second thing about diversity and inclusion specifically, now I'm cutting the sustainability pie and just narrowing down to one thing right now. For Lemon Tree, it has worked rather well because as an organization, and specifically by our own chairman, Patu, who came up with this idea initially and who led this thing and still leads it very, very strongly and firmly, has been that it's part of the business model. It's not charity. It is to say that a person who's differently able, our focus has been largely on disability, and then we moved into focusing on the economically and socially marginalized class as well. And of course, women are very much part of this whole program. So whether it is the number of women in your organization, whether it is getting people with disability to work with you, or it is people who may not have completed their education because they belong to a certain economic or social class. We had to develop, and we have developed in these 8-9 years and more actually, proper processes, HR processes, operations processes, the whole training piece, sensitization of the organization, building culture, so many processes basically have been created and developed that it is very much part of the business model. It's a serious business. It's not something on the side. It's not charity. In fact, we don't even use the word CSR. If you see my sheer designation and the way we define it, it's called Sustainability Initiative. It's not called CSR. So I think it has worked well, and because it was focused as a business initiative. So for example, if we focus on good financial practices, all right, and you build them in and you say, okay, this is the way you should manage your balance sheet, and this is what you should do for giving credit to customers, and this is how you should do collections of money from customers, and blah, blah, blah. You should pay your vendors on time and all of that. Now, these are all the ways you do business. So in the same way, if you open a new hotel and there are going to be 100 staff, at least 15, 20 have to be with disability or from an economically or socially marginalized class. Which kind of disability can do which role? There's a particular thing called job mapping. So we learned that whole process. We built that whole process for ourselves. So if a person is deaf, can he be part of the coffee shop team? Yes, he can. But can he be in-room dining, picking up the phone and taking an order? No, he can't, because he cannot hear and he cannot speak. So how can he do it? Can a person with physical disability who's on a wheelchair, can that person be part of the concierge or the bell desk? No, because that person has to move baggage around. How will it happen? Can that person be part of the front desk or the customer service? Yes, that person can be. So there are certain ways in which job mapping gets done. It's got to do with physical abilities. It's got to do with intellectual disabilities. Now, all of this work, Lemon Tree doesn't know the subject matter. Lemon Tree has to rely on partners. So another huge thing that we learned in this journey was how to partner with NGOs, non-government organizations, as well as training organizations who work in the space of disability, who are in the sector basically.
Right.
And they are trained. They are what is called special educators. They understand how to conduct training for a person who's got autism or who's got Down syndrome or someone who's deaf. They know how to do all that. So, all of us at Lemon Tree have learned the Indian Sign Language, because without that, we can't communicate with our deaf colleagues. So it's fabulous. There are 8,000 employees in this company who know Hindi, who know English, and who know Indian Sign Language. Can you imagine? So it's really good. Some of us know a little bit, some of us know much more, obviously. So the whole idea behind diversity and inclusion at Lemon Tree has been to build culture, to make it part of the DNA, and it is fitting into the business model. This is why it makes sense. And just to tell you, Garima, we've been doing a lot of best practice sharing with other organizations. It could be in the hospitality space, in QSR space, in retail, finance, IT. Now every sector has spent time with us and understood. They've visited us, they've asked us questions, they've asked us for support in their process. And we've done this within India, and very interestingly, we've done it outside India too. We have a program in the UK, in Scotland, where we've been going up and down for 3-4 years, of course not counting the pandemic year. And they've come here and seen the way it works. We've gone there and done sharing. We've done the same thing with Singapore. So it's been very interesting. And last year, my God, in December last year, I was in Geneva at the ILO. And I swear to you, when I was walking on that carpet was representing 100 years of ILO, and it was showing each year. I had goosebumps. I was like, my God, where am I? What am I doing? And I've come here to talk. And that meeting wasn't a large conference. That meeting was a round table discussion. There were 15 people. I was one of those 15. It was insane. So, there are moments like that when your whole system just feels alive and you're like, what the hell? What did we do? And I remember when I told Patu, I said, the ILO wants me to be present. He says, the ILO? You mean the ILO? I said, that's right. He says, go, just go, it's fine. So it was very, very interesting. And what works for us is that these countries are looking at India as a learning ground and specifically at level 3. So we are really very proud when that happens. So that's that piece. And if I keep talking, I'll talk for another hour. So I'll stop.
No, but I think two very interesting things that I'm taking away from this piece, right, is one is the importance of having that culture that everybody else who may not be, somebody who has a disability or has, a physical handicap, they also adapt to it, right? And that's equally as important, to create an environment where you have to change that frame of reference, as you called it, and think about how other people will respond to you. That plus the second thing, which I think is equally important, is the fact that leadership is committed to this, right? And oftentimes that is really the missing key, where if the leadership team is not really pushing hard enough and they're not really driving this from their own experience in the company as well, that's where I think that is why you guys have been able to do so much around this piece as well, and that's very inspiring to hear that. And I didn't know that you had gone to the IIMA and presented this. I think this is wow.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy stuff.
And so now coming back to what you had alluded to a little bit, which is coronavirus and how life must have changed in the hospitality space.
Yeah,
how has that been working out?
So, there's an expression that the rug got pulled from under my feet or the carpet. There's another expression, I got knocked in the solar plexus. You can look at all these expressions. So basically, the wind got knocked out of the hospitality sector globally. Literally, the wind got knocked out. Because the problem was that the moment the pandemic became a pandemic, okay? Firstly, the meaning of pandemic is simply that it's global, right? It's not an epidemic in one country or one region. And the moment that lockdown came on 25th March in India and other countries before that, it was evident that two things were not going to happen. Number one, people were not going to fly. And if people don't fly, no one is going to check into a hotel. So to see your hotel with zero occupancy, it's insane. And we today have 82 hotels in 50 destinations. A large number of them, for those first few days especially, maybe 4 or 5 days, literally had zero occupancy. But then another requirement came up suddenly, which was that there were people returning from other countries to India. And this is before that Bharat mission happened. That was a little later. It was in May or something. I'm talking about March, last few days of March and early April. There were still these emergency arrivals taking place of people because they were just stranded all over the world. Everybody who was out of the country, in the case of India and the country, was in the wrong place. They were not supposed to be there, right? So hotels were called upon, and Lemon Tree was one of the first hotels to be called upon to become quarantine centers. Now, the initial reaction of most hotels was, oh my God, we cannot do this. How can we be a quarantine center? We are about health and hygiene and sanitization. And how can we bring people who might have COVID to our hotel? This is just crazy. But Lemon Tree was very quick to recognize that the coming months were going to be only about quarantine requirements. And therefore, we stepped in early. So one of the things we had to learn, and we had to learn this just by snapping a finger, literally, was that business does not exist. Whatever business exists, can you move and sort of match up to that standard and requirement? So we had to redefine every SOP, whether it was arrival at the gate, arrival at the porch, arrival at the front desk, check-in, reaching your room with the baggage, being able to place an order from the room. Any little process was redefined, reworked, keeping in mind that the WHO and the Ministry of Health in India was defining what an airline or a hotel or whoever needs to do. So the rethink, we redeveloped the Lemon Tree bloody operations business. In a few days, we had to just talk to each other. We were on the phone the whole day, the whole night, don't know, just redefining things. So if you see our manuals today, which are defined for COVID, the COVID world, it's crazy. And that's how we've run these 82 hotels. So in the first month, roughly 50% of the hotels were closed, 50% were open. We also had to close some because certain states had put curfews. So example, Lucknow was on curfew and so on and so forth. Delhi wasn't. Neither was Bangalore or Bombay or anything. So today where we stand, like 85% of our hotels are running. There's still a few which we've kept closed, especially if there are 2-3 hotels nearby. Then we first try to operate 1 or 2 of them and then open the third one.
Right.
So it's been about redeveloping your business. It's been about looking for new markets that didn't exist. It's been about working remotely. Every business has had this thing, but you're a hotel business. How the hell do you work remotely? And the most important one was, because you're a hotel business and your operations team needs to be at the hotel, how can we make sure that we keep them healthy and safe? Because if they fall sick, firstly, there'll be no one to serve the guest, and the risk will go up. So we set up something called the Rest Assured program. It was a hygiene program set up together with a company called Diversity. So you had to do that also, create a new program, which is crazy. So this has been the learning. And the last point I want to say is how we re-looked at costs. We had to become a lean organization, because when there's no revenue, you have to cut the cloth in accordance with that. So whether it was operational costs or whether it was manpower costs, heat, lighting, power, whatever the cost was, it had to be re-looked at. And it's amazing how it has been revised in these 10 months. It's unbelievable. And our chairman and our operation team has been in dialogue for the last month or two, and it continues, that how do we carry these lessons of running a business lean? How do we carry it into the future? So there are models being developed for that right now. So we just read. All I can say is COVID was redefinition.
No, that was going to be my question, that how much of this is going to carry on as well, right? Because I'm sure there's a lot that, because you were pushed against the wall, there was a lot that you discovered you could do in lesser cost or more creatively, or maximizing maybe occupancy rate. So that I think will be the interesting piece as well.
So when you look at it from a cost lens, there was some costs we cut, which would be cutting of flab, which is what we're talking about, which is running leaner, running smarter, running better. So it includes the way we could save energy. It includes the ratio of people to rooms and all of that, staff to rooms.
Right.
There are some things we had to do which cuts muscle actually. So that's when you reduce your services. Okay. So suppose your whole TV array of channels, you bring them down or whatever. You stop using newspapers because there was another risk with newspapers. No, the infection could spread. And some other stuff. You make buffets with simpler menus. Now these things are bringing your service down. You're reducing your service. So some of these things are going to go back to normal as soon as we can. But those that have allowed us to run more efficiently, we're going to stick with them. So that journey is on right now. So I don't know the exact answer to this, but there are enough things that we're going to continue.
Great. Thank you so much, ma'am. I think it was a great conversation. There's a lot that I learned specifically about your life, and also about how hospitality actually isn't just what you see at the front desk and in the lobby. So I mean, obviously I haven't worked in this space, so it was a great learning conversation for me as well. And most of all, thank you so much for taking out this time. I know you're working with the research team that's part of the SIG as well, with Professor Pramila. And it'll be good to see a lot of these practices come out with whatever they've planned in terms of publication. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.